Come see us on tour in Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Co-Host, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, Los Angeles, Bakersfield, San Jose, Toledo, Ohio, and Toronto, Ontario. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. We have special guests. Let's get right to it. Ty Hickey's here with us. He's an Irish polemicist, comedian, writer, filmmaker, known for his work in television, theater, and social media, where he's gained recognition for his video shorts featuring social and political commentary. We've featured lots of his stuff here on this show already. He's been involved in various campaigns for Welsh and Scottish independence, as well as protests against the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Bad boy. In 2024, he published his memoir titled A Portrait of a Piss Artist as a Young Man. Please welcome to the show, Tadhg Hickey. How are you doing, buddy?
Really good, man. Thank you so much for having me. Big fan. Really excited.
So I wanted to first ask you, because I covered this and I got a couple of DMs about it. So, so when Conor McGregor was at the White House, he said this.
I'm here to raise the issues that people of Ireland face, and it'll be music to the people of Ireland's ears, because never on the main stage has the issues the people of Ireland face been spoke. Our government has long since abandoned the voices of the people of Ireland. And it's high time that America is made aware of what is going on in Ireland. What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. Our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed, and the 40 million Irish Americans, as I said, need to hear this, because if not, there will be no place to come home and visit.
So, what is he saying? What's your response to what he said?
Look, Jimmy, I wouldn't be a big Conor McGregor guy. I would say that straight off the bat. But and I'm also wouldn't be in the business of ridiculing people on the right. I know I'm a big fan of your show, and I've heard people talking about that before. If people have grievances about what's going on in Ireland, I think they should definitely be listened to. But in my view, I suppose I'd be quite left-leaning. We have a ruling class problem. We don't have an immigration problem here in Ireland. We have a government who's proven to be completely inept, and a government which is really slow to consult people when immigrants are coming into certain areas of the country and in small towns. But to say that we're being overrun by immigrants, it's just the age-old argument that people on the right, I think, are very fond of and are fed, that the idea that, it's somehow the immigrants' fault that people are out of work and that services don't work in Ireland. The reason that services don't work in Ireland and that people are out of work is because of the role of neoliberalism on this country. And I think capitalism generally, it's in its last legs in Ireland. And we're so tethered to American multinational interests. We put business ahead of everything in Ireland, which is why we're just disgracefully, as a ruling class and as an establishment, still sucking up to Zionists who are murdering children as we speak. Even though the Irish people, for instance, are completely with Palestine, the Irish government and the Irish media class are completely with the Zionists. And I think that's kind of like Conor's expressing frustration from working class people in Ireland for sure, but he's doing it in a way that's not backed up by the data.
So here's some data that I shared before. And so 1 million migrants have settled in Ireland in the past decade, and that 20% of Ireland's population is now foreign-born, which is higher than the UK or the United States. And so there were some riots. And so what do you say about those? So what is there tension over immigration, and is it people scapegoating immigrants? So that's what it sounds like you're saying, that they're scapegoating immigrants for problems of the government not actually providing jobs and taking care of people, right?
Look, you're a lefty like me, You know that this is an age-old trick, and I've just spent time with immigrants in Ireland literally just now, Palestinians who run a cafe in my city in Cork, and they bring so much the fabric of society here. They work really hard. In Ireland, there's people who aren't from Ireland that probably don't work hard, but there's lots more Irish people that don't work hard. We don't have a problem, except I feel, as I say, the government's ineptitude to actually deal with taking our responsibility to take our fair share of refugees, as other countries in Europe have done so. This idea that we have open borders, it's a kind of a fantasy, I think, really. And a lot of it stems from people online we've got a far right in Ireland that used to be a laughing stock a few years ago, and now they're getting funded from far right elements in the US, particularly in Irish America, and through the likes of Tommy Robinson and those types of people in Britain. And they're kind of stirring up and trying to kind of, add fuel to the fire of genuine grievances from working class communities in Ireland, because trade unions have never been so ineffective in Ireland. Like, young men particularly are just totally disaffected. They're out of work. And I'm from a working class background myself. I totally identify with them. But if we could just gather together and have some unity and look at the ruling class of this country, because that's where the problem's always been. We've always had a two-tier system in Ireland, the people who rule and then ordinary working class people. And I know one thing for sure, this completely inept, corrupt government is laughing to itself while groups of working class people are pointing the finger at immigrants and not the ruling class. It's a tale as old as time itself, as you know, Jimmy.
So I've made the case here that there has been an open border policy here in the United States under Joe Biden. For sure there was, right? And to the point where lefties, where I bring on a guy like Dennis Kucinich, who's famous for being gerrymandered out of his own seat in Congress as a Democrat because he stood up for the Palestinians and immigrants. And when he was on my show, he said we need to shut the border down and we have to have orderly immigration. And the case I've made is that it's a real good way to keep the left and the right from coming together to join together to oppose in an economic way in a class war against the oligarchy, to flood the country with immigrants. So now we're fighting amongst each other, right? So now the workers whose wages are being suppressed because immigrants can't organize, they can't join unions, and it's easy to exploit them. And so it's easier to keep the wages down. And so then instead of turning our ire at the ruling class who's allowing this to happen, we turn our ire at people. I've always said if you're angry at someone lower on the economic ladder than you, pretty good chance you're being manipulated by someone higher on the economic ladder than you. And do you think that that's kind of what the play is by the ruling class in Ireland?
100%. And like, Jimmy, you've no idea how sneaky the ruling class is in Ireland, So like, I know we'll obviously get on to Palestine, but Palestine is such a good example of it. So they make these kind of little gestures to try and keep the people happy. But actually behind the scenes, we've got a roaring trade with Israel. We allow US troops to stop over in Shannon Airport, which is a key component in the war machine, in US war machine for the last 25 plus years. When it comes to real action, as Francesca Albanese has said, the Irish government are one of the worst, but they kind of play to the gallery a little bit to try and get people to think that they're actually effective. And it actually does work, because people in West Asia think that the Irish, as a kind of a unified unit of people and government and establishment, are very pro-Palestine, which they're not in real terms. And it's the same thing when it comes to, as you say, we've never had a left-leaning government in Ireland. We've always had these two kind of centre-right-ish parties. And when it comes to election time, we're really kind of stuck in the past. And people who will complain about these two ruling parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they keep getting voted in. They keep making empty promises, and the poor get poorer. And I will say just one last thing on the immigration thing. We do have more people who weren't born in Ireland here now, but the same problems persist. They were there before there was many immigrants, and they're there now. And I just wonder why people will point the finger at immigrants when we didn't have those services. We still had large gaps between the haves and the have-nots in Ireland. That's always been the case in Ireland since the foundation of the state, unfortunately. So, correct me if I'm wrong on this. So what I kind of hear you saying is that the people who are protesting, people who are considered on the right, who are protesting against immigration because they blame the problems on immigration, they have a real grievance, but it's just misdirected. In my opinion, like, so for instance, they often come out with things like you'll get a big version of this in Britain as well, that, there's this thing of like Muslim grooming gangs, but there's no data in Ireland to suggest that the people coming into the country are disproportionately dangerous than white native Irish people or people from Britain, because we have lots of people from Britain here too, or we have Polish here. But
and
those
Ukrainians
kind of bits
also, right?
Ukrainians, yeah, many Ukrainians. But those little bits of disinformation, I suppose, they get out there and they get stuck in people's minds. And then people who I would never vilify them, because especially young, I just think young lads are in a difficult situation in Ireland because the services aren't there. You know, there's a lot of addiction issues. Sadly, I've struggled with that stuff myself, so I have massive empathy. And I think it's useless to try and vilify people, or even at times to call them right or left. I mean, if you're like 18 or 19 and you're setting fire to a bus, you're probably just like, in your mind, having a bit of a wild night out. I don't think you've really got into political ideology at that age. And I think it's a failing of the left as well. The left in Ireland should be a lot more unified and a lot more strong, and the trade union should be a lot stronger to give younger people the hope that leaning to the left, not blaming the immigrant and trying to fight for your rights and vote for your rights and to increase the living standard of people who are, you know, poor or working class is the way to go, as opposed to vilifying foreigners. One other thing as well worth noting is that a lot of these patriots, they claim to be Irish Republicans. So that would be like Irish people who would be very passionate about breaking away from Britain and being independent. But Irish Republicanism, to me, and all the Irish Republicans that I love and read, is internationalist. So to have like an anti-immigrant kind of racist version of Irish Republicanism doesn't really make sense at all. Like, I think a lot of them need to kind of do a little bit more reading, if that doesn't sound too patronizing, which actually it does. So I take that back.
So would you say the general sentiment, because what I was after, when I covered it, it seemed like the general sentiment of the Irish people was frustration with immigration. Now, would you say that's the majority, or would you say that the majority of Irish people identify with them and are welcoming?
Definitely the latter. Like, I think if you'd ask, say, Palestinians who are here at the moment, if you'd ask Ukrainians, certainly the general message that you get from Ireland, and I'd be as critical of the country as probably anyone, but one thing you'd have to say about the Irish is, generally speaking, we're very welcoming people. We don't have that kind of, you know, I have my issues with Britain, obviously historically, but they would have a tradition in the right of racism because they've just had more ethnic minorities in the country. Really, we just don't have that history of racism. We are an oppressed people. We're a colonized people. If you go to Belfast, you see murals of Cuba and South Africa and Palestine on the walls. It's internationalist. I think, generally speaking, some of these protests that you're talking about, I've seen coverage on social media. I mean, like, social media, I love it. Like, it's helped me a lot and stuff. But you know yourself, you can make a protest of 500 people look like it's a big thing and it's a kind of a national calling. There isn't a big feeling on the streets at all. I mean, there was one of those kind of far right patriot protests happened last week, and I think there was about 6 people and a dog at it, like in our main street. You know what I mean? So they aren't always that small, and I'm not dismissing it as a thing or whatever. And I'm also not delegitimizing their grievances. I think fundamentally about the fact that Irish society is broken. But I'd be one for like trying to bring people together, I suppose, and like saying, look, the immigrant is not our problem. Like, it's the people who've always ruled this country and continue to deny you services, you know, and who they're laughing at us, like they're laughing at us squabbling with each other, I think, you know, and that's always been the case. I'm for revolution, like, you know, mine would be Marxist and there might be something else, but let's talk about it instead of blaming someone coming in to Ireland who's been through hell. I mean, one of my good friends in Ireland, like, he's still being denied refugee status. He has no status at all here. And he's been here for like 2.5 years, and illegally, I suppose, because he's had to do this. He works, he provides, you know, a great service to the Irish people. He works really hard. I mean, if that's the type of immigrant that people are complaining about, like, I mean, these people are adding to Ireland, and not just in services. Like, our elite athletes are from sometimes immigrant backgrounds, our elite footballers, you know. I think the best of Ireland is our welcoming nature, you know, so I'd like to put that out there, that's the very best of Irish, I think.
So can you just briefly describe the problems that young people are experiencing, or people and workers in general? I know that the housing crisis in Ireland, like there is everywhere right now, and certainly in the United States, the millennial generation can't afford a house. And in Ireland, I know that housing went up 130% just in the last 10 or 12 years. How is that the kind of problems you're talking about? And is there any, and what are the other ones?
100%. So you might have noticed our leader, Micheál Martin, was with Donald Trump there recently, kind of genuflecting before him quite pathetically. And I think Donald Trump was asked about housing, and Micheál Martin just kind of laughed when Donald Trump said, look, you know, it's a housing issue because everyone wants to live in Ireland. And that's just so far removed from ordinary people in Ireland who've been struggling with a housing crisis that's well into its second decade at this point. And like, these successive governments have all promised that they would solve this issue, and there's no will to solve it because we're so corporatist in our thinking. You know, we've gone so far away from anything approaching a kind of a welfare state at all. So housing is probably the big one. That was the big issue in the last two elections. I would say. You've also got health. We've got a completely broken health sector. People can't access services whatsoever. We've ended up with this kind of two-tier health system. Again, I would say rooted in the haves and the have-nots. The kind of elites in Ireland do very well, and they're really happy for the kind of the plebs to fight amongst themselves. And now we've got potential new enemies in immigrants, you know, so that's even handier again for them. And services, generally service, I would say addiction services are huge. People talk about Dublin being a dangerous city, and the right like to say it's dangerous because there's all these immigrants. It's a dangerous city because Dublin is awash with addiction issues, and people are desperate and they're on the streets. They can't access services. And elitist Dublin, which are happy to snort cocaine every week of their lives, look down their nose at people with, say, heroin addiction, and they're just left on the streets to die or to steal. It's so sad. So that's why Dublin is dangerous, in my opinion, because it's rife with homelessness and addiction issues from people who, at the end of the day, are human beings like you and me, and they've just been left to rot in a corporatist, capitalist state that's just... Our main drug of choice is America. We're just addicted to America, like an American business interests, and we will literally just give up everything that we value to make sure that we keep tethered to this US empire, which I think is, as you've detailed so well yourself, is just committing all manner of crimes all around the world. And I think we're losing our Irishness, but it's not because of immigrants. It's because we're becoming like a colony of America, I think.
So what would you like to see happen?
I'd like to see a revolution, man. I'd like to see a Marxist, socialist revolution, and I don't want to see it just in Ireland. I want to see the people of the world rise up and say 700 people have been killed in the last 2 or 3 days, and the West, not only it'd be great if it was just looking the other way. You could almost get your head around that, but it's actually aiding and abetting this level of violence and murder and mayhem. It's despicable, and our leader is going over to America and sucking up to a man who's just greenlit the resumption of that genocide. It's despicable. I can't find any words when I speak to my Palestinian friends anymore. I'm sure you're the same. You talk to Palestinians, what are you supposed to say to them? Like, there's a good pious, mild-mannered Palestinian friend of mine earlier, said a curse word, like said the F word in a text to me for the first time. He just said, like, fuck this world, like, you know what I mean? I think that for me is just like, it sums up the situation at the moment where, like, these people are being annihilated, and everyone, even the people who are supposedly trying to help, it's mostly just posturing. I think we've tried to be peaceful for the last year and a half. It hasn't worked. And I think no revolution, as you know, happened without people feeling very uncomfortable. And I think that's where we're at. I'd like to see a global revolution, and I think we should gather together and look at the ruling class, the oligarchs, who have us all fighting amongst themselves in these kind of meaningless issues, when the real issue is there's a tiny amount of haves and there's all these have-nots, and if we gather together the power that we'd have together, we could change the world. Now, that's my TED Talk. Thanks for coming.
When you say Marxist, now a lot of people interpret that as communist and authoritarian and anti-freedom, right? And that's not what you mean, correct? What do you mean by you want to see a revolution, and what would that revolution look like? So I get, Neil. So what the problem in the West is that we have called neoliberalism, and it's corporatism, and it's socialism for the wealthy and rugged individualism for everybody else, right? It's the exact opposite. And so you don't mean, when you say Marxist, you don't mean authoritarian.
I'm not talking the gulags of the Soviet Union.
Right.
I'm talking about, I'm sick of, okay, maybe I'll rephrase it to socialism. I'm sick of the idea that somebody proposing socialism, which would give services to people who have no services, that would look after the minorities, would look after the poor and the sick in our own society, that's an extremist, dirty word. I'm sick of it. I never hid it anyway, but I don't think anybody should hide the idea that they'd like to see a socialist revolution. And like, when you speak about restrictions or authoritarianism, what could be more restricted, or what could be more of an authoritarian state than any Western country or the US right now? If you speak up for people who are being mass murdered right now, you will have, in my case, the police calling to your door, the police following you around at protests, my TikTok cancelled, I've lost all work I can think of. I survive on a Patreon account. I haven't been able to get any paid work in Ireland since October 7th. I'm not a member of any extremist group. I'm not running around the streets with a gun. I'm not saying like Allah Akbar, fucking, in my community centre. I don't pick up the kids like, in a balaclava. I'm just advocating for people that are being mass murdered. And I've been completely cancelled. My voice is like, you can't hear me. And you can't hear forget me. You can't hear Palestinians speaking up for themselves. That to me is fascism. That's authoritarianism. That's restriction. So I'm talking about the opposite of that. I wouldn't even want to cancel Zionists. When people say, oh, this Zionist is coming to perform or whatever, I never share that stuff. I'm always like, let them speak. Let us all speak. Let the Zionist speak and say how he can defend bombing hospitals, refugee camps, mass murdering children. Let him speak and make his case, and let us speak who are pro-Palestinian or pro-humanity, I would say, anti-genocide. Let us all speak, and you can make up your own mind. I cancel no one.
So when that's admirable. And that's exactly the feeling I have. That's my sentiment. A free speech absolutist. Everybody gets to speak. And if you're not for the speech that you hate, then you're not for free speech. So that's you have to be for the speech of the people you like and the people you hate. So when I think of socialism, like I've self-described myself many times as a socialist, but what I mean by that, like I took a tour of Europe last year. We went to Sweden, we went to Copenhagen, we went to Oslo, we went to the Netherlands, and I really wasn't in a hurry to come back to the United States because they have figured out.
Why didn't you come to Ireland though? Why not come to Ireland?
I'm coming to Ireland in June. Yeah, I'll be there. I'm coming to Dublin, and I'm trying to set up a date in Belfast right now. So
I was just going to suggest that you got to see Belfast. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so it was wonderful. It's like, oh my God! There were no homeless people that I could see where I went, and everybody was visibly happier. They don't make work the center of their life. They all work hard, but they have a great work-life balance. And they have everybody has health care. Again, like I said, there weren't home. The streets were clean. People had services. I had to use the medical services when I was there. It cost me $18. So that's when I think of socialism, that's what I think of what Bernie Sanders described as democratic socialism, right? So you have democracy, you have free trade, you have capitalism. But you don't have, it's not the gulags, it's not authoritarianism. It's instead of the resources going to, the military industrial complex, it goes to, building infrastructure, giving people health care, providing jobs and things like that, and addiction services, things like that. Yeah. That's what I mean. Is that what you mean when you talk about socialism?
Absolutely. I'm not talking about fundamental. I don't think there's really been a communist state anyway, really, even when if I'm outed as a kind of a lefty in Irish media, the impossibly intelligent journalists of Ireland often say, well, look at communist Russia. That didn't work. you're kind of going like, okay, game, set, and match. Like I've got nothing else.
But they don't. But they don't point to Copenhagen.
No,
right?
No,
they don't
no.
go. Well, look at Denmark. It didn't. It works there. Perfect.
No, they don't talk. They don't talk about like the US going through, you know, practical socialism, like in just after the war, and working very much. They don't talk the fact that we adopted in COVID pretty much socialist patterns. Like if there's a crisis, socialism works really well, especially if there's a crisis for the elites, as you know. Like the bankers get socialism.
That's right.
When they mess up the world economy, they get socialism. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about another way other than capitalism, because I don't know if you've seen what's going on in the world lately, but the dominant capitalist states have got us into a situation where there's endless wars. There's always money for war. Always money for war. No money for service. No, you can't help people out. They're cutting benefits for disabled people in Britain right now, but there's still loads of money for the war effort, the so-called war effort in Israel. And the capitalists are burning the planet to the ground. I mean, that's the big one. I can't even kind of get my head back into that zone at the moment because I'm so concerned for my Palestinian friends that I've got in Ireland and whatnot. But in the meantime, you know, the planet is burning as well, like, because capitalism just keeps on going. And we're the extremists for having the temerity to mention a bit of socialism. I'm sick of it, man. I'm sick of kowtowing. Like, let's get the revolution going.
So I have to remind people, you know, that we have socialism in America. We have public schools. We have public fire departments. We have public roads. We have public police departments. We have Social Security. We have Medicare. And try to take Medicare away from people, they'll fight you. And so that's the kind of socialism. We have libraries, public colleges. That's the kind of socialism I'm talking about. When people immediately jump to communist Russia, to a centralized a handful of government officials who dictate what the economy is going to be, and that's not what I'm talking about. And I don't think that's what you're talking about. We're talking about. Okay, so I just want to make, because I know people who watch the show are going to get confused and they're going to immediately go to that, Soviet communist. We're 100% against that. That's not what we're about. We fight against that kind of authoritarian rule. We're talking about the kind of socialism that works for everybody. Socialism being Social Security, fire departments, police departments, roads, infrastructure, schools, universities. That's what we're talking about. And strong unions.
Societies that work, like, exactly. Unions, workers who have rights and are backed up, and people who have services and what. Like, we're not asking for much. That's what I would say. Yeah. Like, this would be stuff that you would assume would be like pretty low bar stuff, but we're kind of painted, I feel, a little bit as extremists, whilst the people who advocate for this kind of version of this kind of late stage capitalism are burning the planet to the ground, mass murdering people, and just coming up with cash for the weapons industry.
And it's like, it's like what we're getting right now is the worst part of Soviet communism, because we have censorship. We are putting we have it, right? We have authoritarianism. We had mandated experimental medical treatments. We've already had that. We already have all our money going to wars that we don't want. Nobody wants it, right? And the left in the United States do not want these wars. Nobody voted for this. We always vote. We thought we voted for the opposite with Donald Trump, and he's shutting down one war so we could start another with Iran, Yemen, and the slaughter of the Gazans. So. If we're so free, then why do you do this show? Why do I end up just doing stuff for Patreon if we're so free? Because all we're doing is just being critical of the prevailing system. Come see us on tour in Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Co-host, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, Los Angeles, Bakersfield, San Jose, Toledo, Ohio, and Toronto, Ontario. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.